This is an excerpt from Cocoon by Zhang Yueran, translated from Chinese by me, Jeremy Tiang, and published by World Editions. Whenever I start drinking, I feel the need to get drunk. Soberness is a barrier that exists to be smashed. Being drunk is infinite joy and sorrow, a precious experience I hope to share with you sometime. I think I've drunk enough to talk about Grandad. The further he gets from me in time, the more it feels like there's a desert island in the middle of my memory where I can put anything to do with him. The most visible location, but also completely cut off. Now I need to plunge into the icy water and hold my breath as I swim across. I didn't know he existed till I was 6. Auntie was working at the hospital, and she brought me along one day. As we went through the gates, she asked if I remembered being here before, then said I'd been born here. I thought about it, and regretfully informed her I couldn't remember being born. She laughed and said, "You came here after that too, silly, to visit your granddad. He lives on the 3rd floor of this hospital," she said, pointing out the window. Did I remember him? I didn't. But I was curious and asked if we could see him. We walked down a long corridor. The doors on either side were open, and when I peeped into the rooms as we went past, I saw a man's plaster cast leg being hoisted up to the ceiling, then a scrawny man with his head wrapped in so many layers of bandages he looked like a cotton swab. There were between 4 and 6 patients in each room, along with a howling infant, a groaning old person, and various family members squabbling with the nurses. Grandad was at the end of the corridor, a little apart from the other rooms. On his door was the number 317 in bright red, clearly painted by hand as an afterthought, the numerals smaller than for the other rooms. I would later find out that this had been a nurse's office, but they converted it when they needed somewhere to put Grandad. It was very quiet inside. The room wasn't very large, but because it only contained a single bed, it felt cavernous. The person in the bed must be Grandad. I went over and studied his large, pale face, his eyes like raisins. Though his eyeballs moved, his gaze only went from one part of the ceiling to another, never to us. Grandad. The word felt insubstantial in my mouth, hollow as an empty bean pod. The last time I'd said that word, I'd probably only just learned to speak. Auntie said when they brought me here before, Mum pointed at the man in the bed and told me that was my Grandad, and, as if I'd been given a new toy, I shouted excitedly, "Grandad!" "Stop that," Dad had said. "He can't hear you." Auntie explained that Grandad was in a vegetative state. That means he can't speak or move, just like those. She pointed at the withered orchids on the windowsill. I went back to the hospital alone the next day. Grabbing a water bottle, I clambered up onto the bed and poured its contents over Grandad from head to foot, then waited to see what color flowers he would sprout. Eventually a nurse came in and grumpily changed his soaked bedclothes. Next she put a long pipe down his throat and poured in a brown slurry. So that was how Grandad got his nutrients. For a long time after this, I snuck into Grandad's room almost every day. When I stood by his bed, he looked at me, and when I blinked, he did that too. I winked, and after a while, he blinked again. I tried with the other eye, but he just stared at me. No reaction. At 3, the nurse came in and shooed me out. She didn't want me to see him piss and shit. A process I could only imagine. Grandpa seemed like a sort of plant that had been placed in someone else's home, and I felt I had a duty to visit him. I hoped I'd be able to train him to do something, squint, raise his eyebrows, even smile. But after 2 weeks, with no result, I gave up.